The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a cathedral made of light. Crystal walls rose toward a dome that showed the stars themselves, and 17 platforms floated in a circle around a central stage. Each platform held the representative of a different spacefaring civilization, beings of every shape and color that the universe had created. Daniel Carter stood on the human platform, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the proceedings below. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too many negotiations turn sour. 12 years he had served as Earth's ambassador to this place. And in that time he had learned one important truth. The Council respected strength, not kindness. The Volanti High Counselor, a creature named Vareth, whose silver scales caught the starlight, was speaking about trade routes in the outer reaches. His voice was smooth and musical, the way all Volanti spoke, but Daniel heard the threat beneath the pretty words. The Volanti wanted more control over shipping lanes the human freighters used every day. Daniel made a note on his tablet and said nothing. There would be time to argue later, in private meetings where deals were actually made. The public sessions were theater, nothing more. 60 years ago, humanity had stumbled into this gallery of ancient civilizations. The first contact had been with a Corvex survey ship near Jupiter, and within a decade, Earth had joined the Galactic Council as its newest and youngest member. The older races had looked at humans the way adults look at children playing with dangerous toys. But then the Void Reavers came. Daniel still remembered the news reports from his childhood. The terrifying images of Reaver dreadnoughts tearing through Council defenses like paper. The Reavers were not a civilization in any real sense. They were a swarm, a hunger that moved between stars and consumed everything in its path. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They simply destroyed. The Council had been losing the war when Admiral Patricia Dunn made her stand at Cygnus Gate. She had commanded a fleet of 47 human warships against a Reaver force 3 times that size. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 23 human ships were destroyed and Admiral Dunn was dead. But the Reaver advance had stopped. That sacrifice had earned humanity a seat at the table. The older races stopped treating humans like children and started treating them like useful weapons instead. It was not respect, exactly, but it was something. Daniel had spent his career trying to turn that something into genuine partnership. He had negotiated trade agreements that benefited Earth. He had argued for human colonists to receive the same protections as citizens of older races. He had pushed, slowly and carefully, for humanity to be seen as more than just soldiers. The session ended and the platforms began to lower. Daniel stepped off onto the main floor, where representatives mingled and made small talk that was never really small. A Corvex diplomat approached him, a being that looked something like a tall insect with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected Daniel's face in 100 tiny images. "Ambassador Carter," the Corvex said, "I hope you found today's session informative." "Very much so," Daniel replied. "Though I noticed the discussion of the Nexaran mining rights was postponed again. These things take time. The question of territorial claims is complicated." Daniel smiled politely. 40,000 humans have lived on Nexara for 30 years. The claim seems clear to me. The Corvex made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. History is longer than 30 years, Ambassador. Much longer. Daniel watched the Corvex walk away and felt a familiar knot of worry in his stomach. The Nexaran question had been floating through council committees for months now, always delayed, never resolved. He had written a dozen reports to Earth warning that something was wrong. But his superiors seemed confident that the system would work in humanity's favor. Daniel was not so sure. He made his way through the crowd, nodding to familiar faces and exchanging meaningless pleasantries. The council headquarters on Nexus Prime was a city unto itself, with thousands of diplomats and staff from every member world living and working in its towers. Daniel had an apartment on the human level, a comfortable space that he rarely had time to enjoy. His assistant, a young woman named Lisa Park, was waiting for him in his office with a tablet full of messages. "The Secretary of State wants your assessment of the trade negotiations," she said. "And there's a request from Admiral Webb for updated intelligence on Reaver movements." Daniel took the tablet and scrolled through the messages. Anything from the Nexaran governor? 3 messages in the last 2 days. He's worried about the Korvax survey ships that keep appearing in his system. So am I. Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the alien cityscape. Nexus Prime was a beautiful world, its purple sky and golden buildings like something from a dream. But beauty could hide danger, and Daniel had learned to look past surfaces. The Nexaran colony was everything humanity had hoped to build among the stars. It was a place where families lived and worked, where children were born and grew up under an alien sun. The miners who had first settled there had long since been joined by teachers and doctors and farmers. Nexar was home to 40,000 people who had never seen Earth and never wanted to. The Korvax claim to the system was absurd. Their evidence was nothing but old stories and star charts that could have been drawn yesterday for all anyone could prove. Any fair court would dismiss the petition in minutes, but the Council was not a fair court. The Council was a place where ancient races traded favors and carved up the galaxy according to their own interests. Humanity was useful, yes, but humans were still newcomers. When the old powers wanted something, they usually found a way to get it. Daniel thought about Admiral Dunn and the fleet she had sacrificed at Cygnus Gate. He thought about all the human soldiers who had died, protecting Council space from the Reavers. He thought about the promises that had been made, the assurances that humanity's loyalty would be rewarded. He hoped those promises meant something. He feared they did not. "Lisa," he said without turning from the window, "set up a meeting with High Counselor Vareth. Tell him I want to discuss the Nexaran situation directly. He'll probably refuse. He probably will. Set it up anyway." Daniel watched the alien sun set over the crystal towers and wondered if humanity had been foolish to trust these ancient powers. 60 years of service, 60 years of blood and sacrifice. And still they were outsiders looking in. Something was coming. Daniel could feel it in his bones, a storm building just beyond the horizon. He did not know what form it would take or when it would arrive. But he knew one thing for certain. When the storm broke, humanity would have to decide what kind of people they truly were. He hoped they would choose wisely. The council chamber was full when Daniel arrived. Every platform was occupied, every seat taken by diplomats and observers who had come to witness what they knew would be a historic vote. The air hummed with quiet conversations in a dozen alien languages, and Daniel felt the weight of every eye that turned toward him as he took his place. High Counselor Vareth stood at the central podium, his silver scales polished to a mirror shine. He held a document in his long fingers, a formal petition that Daniel had read 100 times and still could not believe was being taken seriously. "The matter before us today concerns the Nexaran system," Vareth announced. "The Korvax Dominion has presented historical evidence supporting their ancestral claim to this territory. After careful review, the Committee on Territorial Affairs recommends that this claim be recognized." Daniel stepped forward on his platform. "I request permission to speak. The human representative is recognized." Daniel looked around the chamber at the faces of beings he had worked beside for 12 years. Some would not meet his gaze. Others watched him with expressions that might have been pity or might have been contempt. He could not tell the difference anymore. "The evidence presented by the Korvax is nothing but mythology," Daniel said. "Their star charts are unverified. Their historical records mention a system that could be any of 1,000 places in this region of space. Meanwhile, 40,000 human citizens have lived on Nexera for 3 decades. They have built homes and schools and hospitals. They have raised families under that sun. By any reasonable standard, Nexera is a human world. The Korvax representative, the same diplomat who had spoken to Daniel days before, made a sound of disagreement. Human occupation does not erase our heritage. Our ancestors walked that world long before your species learned to make fire. Then where is your evidence? Where are the ruins, the artifacts, the genetic traces? Show me one piece of concrete proof that the Korvax ever set foot on Nexera. The sacred texts speak clearly. We do not require physical evidence to know what our ancestors did. Daniel felt his patience cracking. Sacred texts are not evidence. They are stories. You cannot take a world away from living people based on stories. Varath raised his hand for silence. The committee has reviewed all available information and reached its conclusion. We will now proceed to a vote. Daniel watched the voting display light up above the central podium. One by one, the council members made their choices. The Korvax voted yes, of course. The Volanthi, humanity's supposed allies in trade and defense, voted yes. The Arathi abstained, unwilling to take sides. The smaller races followed the lead of the larger ones, afraid to stand against the established powers. When the count was finished, the result was clear. 15 votes in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstention. The Korvax claim was recognized. Nexera no longer belonged to the humans who lived there. This decision is effective immediately, Varys said. The human population of Nexera will have 6 standard months to relocate to other territories. All mining operations will cease pending transfer to Korvax authority. Daniel felt something break inside him, a piece of trust that he had carried for 12 years shattering into dust. He thought of the messages from Governor Samuel Drake, the fear in his voice as he reported Korvax ships circling his world. He thought of the children playing in Nexeran streets who had just been told their home was not their own. And if our citizens refused to leave? Daniel asked. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. Varath's compound eyes showed no emotion. Then they will be considered illegal occupants and removed by force. The Council will provide military support for the transition if necessary. Military support, Daniel repeated. You mean you will send soldiers to drag families from their homes? We will enforce the lawful decisions of this body. That is what the Council exists to do. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked around the chamber one more time, memorizing every face, every platform, every vote that had been cast against his people. Then he straightened his shoulders and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the Great Dome. I need to contact my government. Earth will have a response to this decision. Of course, Vareth said. We trust that humanity will accept this ruling peacefully. We have always valued our partnership with Earth. Daniel said nothing. There was nothing left to say. He left the chamber and walked through the corridors of the council headquarters with measured steps. Lisa Park fell in beside him, her face pale with shock. Ambassador, what are we going to do? I'm going to call President Bennett. Then we're going to find out what kind of people we really are. The communication room was secured with the best encryption that Earth scientists could create. Daniel sat before the screen and waited as the signal traveled across the light years to Earth. When President Laura Bennett's face appeared, he saw that she already knew something was wrong. Daniel, what happened? He told her everything. The vote, the justification, the threat of military force. He told her about the faces of their allies turning away, about 60 years of service dismissed like it meant nothing. He told her about the children on Nexera who would wake up tomorrow to learn that strangers had given away their world. Laura listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Do you remember what Admiral Dunn said before Cygnus Gate? She finally asked. Daniel nodded. Every human who had lived through those dark days knew the Admiral's final words. We hold the line here, or we hold it nowhere. She was right then. Maybe she's still right now. Laura's jaw tightened. Get ready to deliver a message, Daniel. The Council is about to learn what it really means to have humanity as a partner. Daniel felt something stir in his chest, something that might have been hope or might have been fury. What are you going to do? What we should have done the first time they showed us who they really are. We're going to stop playing their game. The message that Daniel delivered to the Council the next day was unlike anything they had ever heard from a human ambassador. It was not a plea or a negotiation or a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. Earth was withdrawing from the Galactic Council effective immediately. All human military forces would return to human space. All defense treaties were void. All trade agreements were suspended. Human ships would no longer patrol Council space or protect Council citizens from the Reavers, and if anyone tried to remove the colonists from Nexera, they would be met with the full force of Earth's military. The Council chamber erupted in chaos. Vareth demanded clarification. The Korvax representatives screamed about violations of protocol. The smaller races looked at each other with fear in their eyes, suddenly realizing what it would mean to face the darkness without human ships standing beside them. Daniel Carter watched it all with a face of stone. 60 years of trust, 60 years of sacrifice, and this is what it had come to. He thought of Admiral Dunn and wondered if she would have been proud or heartbroken. Perhaps both. This decision is final, Daniel said when the noise died down. You treated us like weapons to be used and discarded. Now you will learn what the galaxy looks like without us. He turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the Council to contemplate the silence that was coming. The Situation Room beneath the White House was full of people who had not slept in days. President Laura Bennett sat at the head of the table, her coffee cold and forgotten, as her advisors argued about the future of humanity's place among the stars. Admiral Christine Webb stood before a holographic display that showed the positions of every human ship in the galaxy. There were thousands of them, scattered across Council space like seeds thrown by a careless hand. Some were warships, bristling with weapons that had held back the Reavers for decades. Others were freighters and transports, the lifeblood of interstellar trade. All of them were now coming home. The Third Fleet has reached Nexera, Webb reported. Governor Drake says the colonists are relieved. They were afraid we had abandoned them. We would never abandon our people, Lavra said. That's the whole point of this. Secretary of Defense Kevin Price leaned forward. The Korvax are making threatening noises, but they haven't actually moved any ships toward the system. I think they're hoping this is all a bluff. It's not a bluff, Lavra said flatly. If they try to take Nexera, we destroy their fleet. Make sure they understand that. National Security Advisor Marcus Young shook his head. The Council won't let this stand. They'll pressure us, sanction us, try to starve us into submission. Let them try. We've spent 60 years feeding their economy and protecting their borders. They need us more than we need them. Admiral Webb changed the display to show the outer reaches, the vast expanse of space between Council territory and the unknown regions where the Reavers lurked. Red icons marked the positions of early warning stations that human crews had maintained for 4 decades. Once we pull out of these positions, the Council will have to replace us, Webb said. The Volanthi and Korvax don't have the ships or the personnel. The Arthi are too far away. The smaller races couldn't hold these stations, even if they wanted to. What about the Reavers? Price asked. Webb's face was grim. Our intelligence suggests they've been testing our defenses for months. They know something is changing. If we leave gaps in the perimeter, they'll find them. Lavra stood and walked to the display. She touched one of the red icons. An outpost near a dead star, that had been humanity's first line of defense against the swarm. Men and women had lived and died at that post, watching the darkness for signs of danger. "We didn't build this network for the Council," she said quietly. "We built it because it was the right thing to do. Because protecting innocent people from monsters is what good people do." "So we should stay?" Price asked. "No, we should let the Council understand what they've lost." Laura turned to face her advisors. "Pull back the perimeter stations. Bring our people home. Let the ancient powers of the galaxy protect themselves for a while." The orders went out within the hour. Across 1,000 light years, human crews began shutting down the systems they had maintained for generations. They packed their belongings, said goodbye to the alien landscapes they had grown to love, and boarded ships that would carry them back to Earth. On Nexera, Governor Samuel Drake stood on the balcony of his office and watched the Third Fleet take up positions in orbit. The great warships hung in the sky like protective spirits, their running lights blinking against the stars. His assistant, a young man named Peter Collins, joined him with a tablet full of reports. "The refugees from the outer stations are starting to arrive," Peter said. "We're setting up temporary housing, but it's going to be crowded." "Better crowded than dead," Drake replied. "Have you heard anything from the Council?" "Nothing official. But there are rumors that the Korvax are reconsidering their claim." Drake laughed bitterly. "Of course they are. They thought we would roll over and accept their theft. They never expected us to fight back. What if they still tried to take the planet?" Drake looked at the warships in the sky, at the power they represented. "Then they'll learn why the Reavers fear human ships." The weeks that followed were strange and tense. Human freighters stopped delivering goods to Council ports. Human patrols vanished from shipping lanes that had been safe for decades. Human engineers left the maintenance stations they had built around Council jump gates, taking their expertise with them. The Council responded with outrage and denial. High Councilor Vurath gave speeches about human aggression and irresponsibility. The Volanti news networks portrayed humans as primitive savages who had never truly belonged among civilized species. The Korvax demanded that Earth be sanctioned and punished for its defiance. But beneath the angry words, fear was spreading. The first Reaver scouts appeared in the outer reaches 3 weeks after the human withdrawal. They were small ships, just probes testing the defenses, but they found gaps where human stations had once stood. The Arthi home fleet drove them back, but the message was clear. The darkness was watching. Trade routes the human ships had protected fell silent. Pirates who had hidden from human patrols for years emerged to prey on merchant vessels. The economy of the Corinth sector, which depended on human shipping lanes, began to collapse. And in the Council chamber, the ancient powers of the galaxy began to realize what they had done. Ambassador Daniel Carter remained on Nexus Prime, though he no longer attended Council sessions. He spent his days meeting with representatives of the smaller races, the ones who had been afraid to vote against the Korvax claim. Many of them came to him in secret, afraid of being seen with the human ambassador. "We didn't want this," one told him, a being from a world that Earth had helped protect from raiders for 30 years. "But what could we do?" "The Volanti and Korvax control everything." "You could have stood with us," Daniel said without anger. "You could have told them that principles matter more than politics. And then what? They would have turned on us too." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe, but at least you would have been able to look at yourselves in the mirror." The smaller races had no answer to that. They knew he was right, and the knowledge burned them. Lisa Park found Daniel in his office late one night, staring at a message on his screen. "What is it?" she asked. "The Arthi ambassador wants to meet. Off the record, somewhere private." The Arthi abstained from the vote. "They didn't betray us." Daniel turned to look at her. "They didn't help us either. But maybe they're ready to change that." He met the Arathi ambassador in a small garden on the edge of the council headquarters. The Arathi were tall beings, slender and graceful, with skin that changed color with their moods. This one was named Saren, and she had always been friendlier to humans than most. "Your withdrawal is causing problems," Saren said without greeting. That was the idea. "The Reavers are probing our borders. Without human ships, we cannot hold them back forever." Daniel felt a flicker of the old anger. "So you want us to come back and die for you again? After everything that happened?" Saren's skin shifted to a deep blue, the color of shame among her people. "I know what you think of us. I know we failed you. But the Reavers don't care about politics. They will consume us all if we don't stand together. Then perhaps you should tell that to High Counselor Varath." Saren was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Something is coming, Ambassador? Something worse than anything we faced before. The Reavers are gathering in numbers we haven't seen in 40 years. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "How do you know this?" "We have scouts beyond the outer reaches. They've seen the swarm massing." Saren's skin shifted again to the pale gray of fear. "When they come, they will not stop at the border stations. They will come for everything." Daniel looked up at the alien stars and thought about the storm he had felt building for so long. It seemed the storm was closer than anyone had realized. "I'll tell my government," he said, "but I can't promise anything. The council broke our trust. Rebuilding it will take more than warnings." Saren nodded slowly. "I understand. But please, Ambassador, don't let your anger blind you to the danger. Some things are more important than pride." Daniel watched her walk away and wondered if she was right. He hoped he would never have to find out. 6 months passed in a galaxy that was slowly forgetting what safety felt like. On Earth, life continued much as it always had. The cities hummed with activity, the markets stayed full, and people went about their daily business with little thought for the distant stars. Most humans had never traveled beyond their own solar system. The Council, the Reavers, the ancient powers of the galaxy were just stories to them. Things that happened far away to other people. But in the military headquarters buried beneath mountains and oceans, the Watchers never slept. They tracked every ship, every signal, every whisper from the darkness beyond human space. And what they saw worried them deeply. Admiral Christine. Webb stood before President Laura Bennett with a report that she wished. She did not have to deliver. The Reavers attacked. "Corinth sector last week," Webb said. 3 colony worlds hit simultaneously. The Council fleet responded, but they arrived too late. Estimated casualties are in the millions. Lavra closed her eyes briefly. "How bad is it getting out there?" "Bad. Without our early warning network, the Council can't detect Reaver movements until they're already in populated space. Their response times have tripled. Their casualties have increased tenfold." "And what are they saying about us?" Webb's lip curled slightly. "Officially, they blame us for abandoning them. The Volanthi news networks call us cowards and traitors. High Counselor Vereth has demanded that we return to our defensive positions immediately." "Demanded," Lava repeated. "Not asked. Not requested. Demanded. That's right." Lava stood and walked to the window of her office. Outside, the sun was setting over Washington, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful, peaceful, safe. She wondered how many sunsets were being watched on worlds that would never see another morning. "What do you think we should do?" she asked. Webb was quiet for a moment. "I think we did the right thing by leaving. The Council needed to understand that they couldn't treat us like servants. But I also think that letting innocent people die because of something their leaders did is not who we are." "So you want us to go back?" "I want us to find a middle ground. something between total withdrawal and total submission. Lavra turned to face her admiral. "What do you suggest?" "Let me take a small fleet to the outer reaches. Not to protect Council space, but to gather intelligence and establish our own defensive line. If the Reavers are really gathering for a major assault, we need to know about it. And if the Council sees that as us coming back with our tail between our legs..." Webb smiled grimly. "Let them think what they want. We'll know the truth." The expedition launched 2 weeks later. Admiral Webb commanded a task force of 12 ships, including the carrier Constellation and the battlecruiser Yorktown. They jumped to the edge of human space and began their long journey into the darkness. Meanwhile, on Nexera, Governor Samuel Drake faced a different kind of challenge. The planet had become a refuge for humans fleeing the chaos in Council space. Every week, new ships arrived carrying families who had lost everything to Reaver attacks or economic collapse. The population had doubled in 6 months, straining resources that were already stretched thin. Peter Collins brought Drake the latest numbers over breakfast. "We're running low on medical supplies. The last shipment from Earth was delayed by pirates." "Pirates in our own shipping lanes?" Drake frowned. "I thought we cleared those out years ago." "We did. But with all our ships pulled back to defended positions, the lanes aren't as safe as they used to be." Drake pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "Contact Admiral Webb's fleet. Ask if they can spare a few escorts for the supply convoys. The Admiral's fleet is in the outer reaches. It would take weeks to reach us. Then find someone else. I don't care how you do it. Those supplies need to get through." Peter nodded and hurried away. Drake sat alone in his office, looking out at the city that had grown so much in such a short time. New buildings rose everywhere, hastily constructed shelters for the refugees who kept arriving. The streets were crowded with people who had nowhere else to go. He thought about what the Council had tried to do to this place. They had wanted to hand it over to the Corvex like it was nothing, like the lives of 40,000 people meant less than ancient myths and political convenience. The thought still made his blood boil, but he also thought about the refugees, about the stories they told of Reaver attacks and Council failures. These were people who had trusted the system to protect them, who had believed in the ancient powers that ruled the galaxy. Now they had nothing but the hope that humans would give them shelter. Was humanity really any better than the Council? Were they really the good people they believed themselves to be? Drake did not have an answer. In the outer reaches, Admiral Webb found what she was looking for. The Reaver gathering point was a dead system, a burned-out star surrounded by the corpses of planets that had died long before life arose on Earth. And in the darkness around that dead sun, thousands of Reaver ships waited. Webb stared at the sensor readings and felt her heart go cold. "That's the largest fleet I've ever seen." Her tactical officer, Commander Eric Lane, nodded grimly. "At least 3,000 ships, Admiral. Maybe more. Our sensors can't penetrate the radiation field around the star." "Where are they going?" Lane worked his console for a moment. "Based on their formation and heading, they're preparing to move toward Council space. The most likely target is..." He paused, his face going pale. "Galanthi Prime." Webb felt the blood drain from her face. Galanthi Prime was the Council's capital, the heart of galactic civilization. If the Reavers struck there, the chaos would spread to every corner of the galaxy. How long before they move? Days, maybe hours. There's no way to know for certain. Webb stood absolutely still, her mind racing through options that all seemed impossible. She could try to warn the Council, but would they listen? She could try to stop the Reavers herself, but 12 ships against 3,000 was suicide. She could retreat to human space and let the Council face the consequences of its arrogance. She thought about the people on Galanthi Prime, millions of them, going about their daily lives with no idea that death was coming for them. They were not the ones who had voted to betray humanity. They were just people, as innocent as the humans on Nexera, as innocent as anyone caught in the path of the swarm. "Send a message to Earth," she said finally. "Priority 1 encrypted. Tell the President what we found. And then?" Webb looked at the sensor display, at the vast darkness where the Reavers waited. "Then we watch and pray that someone makes the right choice." The message reached Earth 12 hours later. President Bennett read it in silence, then passed it to her advisors without comment. Marcus Young spoke first. "If this is accurate, the Council is about to face the worst attack in their history. Without our help, they'll be devastated." "And why should that be our problem?" Kevin Price demanded. "They betrayed us. They threatened our people. Let them reap what they've sown." "Millions of innocent people will die," Lawver said quietly. "Millions of innocent people have already died because the Council couldn't protect them. We didn't cause this. We don't have to fix it." Lawver looked at the message again, at the numbers that represented ships and weapons and death. She thought about Admiral Dunn at Cygnus Gate, about the choice she had made to stand and fight when running would have been easier. "We have a few days before the Reavers move," she said. "I want options. All of them. We'll make a decision when we have to, and not before." But even as she spoke, Lara knew what decision she would make. She had known it from the moment she read Webb's message. The only question was whether humanity would follow her into the fire. The attack on Volanti Prime came without warning. 3 Reaver dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace above the Council's capital world, their massive hulls blotting out the stars like spreading stains of darkness. Behind them came hundreds of smaller ships, a swarm of death that spread across the sky like a plague. The Volanti fleet responded immediately, but they were outmatched from the start. Their ships were elegant and beautiful, designed for parades and diplomatic missions, not for the brutal reality of war against an enemy that did not negotiate or retreat. Within the first hour, a third of their fleet was destroyed. High Councilor Verath watched from the council chamber as fire rained from the sky. The crystalline dome that had sheltered generations of diplomats cracked under the bombardment, showering the assembly hall with glittering shards. Representatives of a dozen worlds screamed and fled, their ancient dignity forgotten in the face of death. "Where are the reinforcements?" Verath demanded of his military commander. "Where is the combined fleet?" Scattered across council space, responding to other attacks. The Reavers struck simultaneously at 7 different systems. "We cannot concentrate our forces." The Wrath's silver scales had turned pale with fear. He had ruled the Council for 15 years, had shaped the destiny of the galaxy according to his will. Now he watched that galaxy crumble, and he knew there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Send a message," he said, "to everyone. Anyone who can help. Everyone, High Counselor?" Verath closed his eyes. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. "Even the humans. Especially the humans." The message reached Earth in minutes. President Lawver Bennett read it and felt something twist in her heart, a mixture of vindication and sorrow that she could not untangle. "They're begging," Marcus Young said. "After everything they did, they're begging us to save them. Can we?" Lawver asked Admiral Webb, who had returned from the outer reaches with her intelligence and her warnings. Webb studied the tactical display. "The 4th Fleet is ready to move. We could reach Volanti Prime in 6 hours if we push the engines. But we'd be jumping into a battle against overwhelming odds. Can we win?" Webb was silent for a long moment. "We can make a difference. Whether that's enough to win, I honestly don't know." Lawver looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. Some wanted to help. Some wanted to let the council burn. All of them were waiting for her to decide. She thought about Admiral Dunn again, about that final stand at Cygnus Gate. Dunn had known she would probably die. She had known that the odds were against her, that the enemy was stronger, that there was no guarantee of victory. But she had fought anyway, because some things were worth fighting for even when winning was not certain. "We're going," Laura said. "All of us. Everything we have." The Fourth Fleet jumped to Volanti Prime 6 hours later. They arrived to find a world in flames. The northern continent was burning, entire cities reduced to ash by Reaver bombardment. The Volanti fleet was scattered, their survivors fighting desperately against an enemy that seemed endless. 2 Reaver dreadnoughts had been destroyed, but the third was still hammering the planet, its weapons carving scars across the surface that would never heal. Admiral Webb took command of the battle from the bridge of the Constellation. Her voice was calm and steady as she issued orders that would determine the fate of millions. "All ships, form up on my position. We're going straight for that dreadnought." Commander Lane looked at her with something like awe. "Admiral, that thing has more firepower than our entire fleet." "I know, but it's not expecting us. And it doesn't know how humans fight." The Fourth Fleet drove into the heart of the Reaver swarm like a spear thrust into a wound. Human ships were different from the elegant vessels of the Council, built for war in a way that the ancient races had never understood. They were tough and fast and crewed by men and women who had grown up knowing that the universe was dangerous. The battle lasted 4 hours. Human ships died by the dozen, their crews sacrificing themselves to clear a path to the dreadnought. The Constellation herself took heavy damage, her hull breached in 3 places, her weapon systems failing one by one. But they reached the dreadnought. Admiral Webb led the final assault personally, commanding from a command pod that had lost half its screens and most of its power. She watched as human torpedoes slammed into the Reaver vessel, as explosions bloomed across its hull like flowers of fire. "Direct hit on their power core," Lane reported, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "They're losing containment. All ships, pull back. Give them room to die." The Reaver dreadnought exploded in a flash of light that was visible from the planet's surface. The surviving Reaver ships scattered, their coordination broken, their swarm mind confused by the loss of their largest vessel. The Council fleet, rallied by humanity's example, chased them into the darkness. When it was over, Admiral Webb sat in her command chair and wept. They had won. But the cost had been terrible. 12 million Volanti were dead. The Council chamber was ruined, its dome cracked and stained with ash. A third of the Fourth Fleet had been destroyed, their crews joining the long list of humans who had died protecting people who had never truly accepted them. Ambassador Daniel Carter returned to the chamber 2 days later. The dome was gone now, replaced by emergency shelters and temporary structures. The representatives of the Council sat in the wreckage of their pride, their fine robes dirty, their ancient arrogance broken. High Council of Earth stood to greet him. The Volanti leader looked older somehow, his silver scales dull, his movements slow and painful. "Ambassador Carter, we are grateful that you came." Daniel looked around the ruined chamber. He felt no satisfaction in the destruction, no pleasure in the humbling of those who had wronged his people. He felt only a tired sadness for what could have been. "We didn't come for gratitude," he said. "We came because it was the right thing to do. After what we did to you, after how we treated your people." Daniel met Varath's gaze without flinching. "You treated us like weapons to be used and discarded. You forgot that weapons can choose where they aim. But we never forgot who we are. We protect people who need protection, even people who have hurt us." Varath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand something. We will stand with you against the Reavers. We will help you rebuild what was lost. We will defend your worlds as if they were our own. But we will do it as equals, or we will not do it at all." "Equals," Varath repeated. "After 60 years of treating you as less than equals. That's the offer. Take it or leave it. The council took it. The new charter was signed on the anniversary of humanity's withdrawal. It established Earth as a founding member of the reformed Galactic Council, with full voting rights and veto power over military decisions. Admiral Webb was given command of the combined fleet, the first human to hold such a position. Under her leadership, the Reavers were pushed back beyond the outer reaches. Their threat contained for another generation. Governor Samuel Drake remained on Nexera, which became a symbol of what humanity had nearly lost and what they had ultimately preserved. The colony grew, welcoming settlers from Earth and eventually from other council worlds who wanted to live under human protection. The Corvex never mentioned their claim to the system. Again, 1 year after the Battle of Valanthi Prime, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood on a balcony overlooking the new council chamber. The building was not as grand as the old one, but it was stronger, built to withstand the storms that the galaxy would surely send. Lisa Park joined him with 2 glasses of wine. The Arthi ambassador is asking for you. Something about a new trade agreement. Daniel took one of the glasses and sipped it slowly. Let her wait. I'm enjoying the view. Lisa looked out at the alien cityscape, at the purple sky and golden buildings that glittered in the starlight. It is beautiful. It is. I just wish we hadn't needed a war to appreciate it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the galaxy turn. Somewhere out there, the Reavers were still lurking, still hungry, still waiting for another chance to consume everything in their path. Somewhere out there, new challenges were forming. New threats that humanity would have to face. But for now, there was peace. And Daniel Carter, who had spent his whole life fighting for a place at the table, finally felt like he belonged. The stars belonged to those who were willing to fight for them. Not just against enemies, but for the principles that made the fighting worthwhile. Humanity had learned that lesson the hard way, and they would never forget it.